Finally, the bombardment ceased. The whistles of the officers shrieked out along the front.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 battles that changed history. For this list, we're looking at wartime military engagement that had significant impacts on human history. Which of these fascinates you? What would the world look like if these battles had gone differently? Let us know in the comments. Number 20, the Battle of Actium. After Julius Caesar's assassination, rulership of Rome was shared between Octavian, Mark Antony, and, for a time, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Antony married Octavian's sister, but fell in love with Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. He even formally recognized her son Caesarion as Caesar's true son and heir.
Octavian suspects his rival has been seduced by her power. He realizes that together, Antony and Cleopatra pose a threat to his ambitions.
This led to civil war with Octavian, which, on September 2nd, 31 BC, culminated in the Battle of Actium in the Ionian Sea. It ended with Antony defeated and taking his own life, as did Cleopatra. Octavian became the first Roman emperor, taking the name Augustus Caesar and leading Rome into an era of prosperity and expansion, now known as the Pax Romana.
After she and Antony die, Octavian assumes the name Caesar Augustus and founds the Roman Empire.
Had Octavian lost the Battle of Actium, both Roman and Egyptian history would have taken very different courses.
So you can say that the modern world evolves out of the events resulting from the Battle of Actium.
Number 19, the Siege of Yorktown. A decisive battle in the American Revolutionary War, the Siege of Yorktown took place throughout the fall of 1781.
At his headquarters in New York, Commander-in-Chief George Washington saw the present crisis unfold and observed, "We're at the end of our tether, and now or never, our deliverance must come."
On one side was George Washington and France, and on the other, Lord Cornwallis and Great Britain. After nearly a month of fighting, Cornwallis surrendered.
The British march from the ruined remains of Yorktown. They stack their weapons and surrender their flag.
This led to the Peace of Paris, which marked the end of the First British Empire, with the 13 colonies forming the United States of America. The success of the American Revolution also helped inspire the French Revolution in 1789. The Western world would look very different today had Britain won at Yorktown.
When Lord North, the British Prime Minister, learns of the defeat a month later, he blurts, "Oh God, it is all over."
Number 18, the Battle of Badr. Also known as the Day of the Criterion, the Battle of Badr ensured the survival and expansion of Islam.
Brothers, we hold the wells.
In 622, Muhammad and his followers fled persecution in Mecca, moving to Medina. 2 years later, Muhammad sought to raid a Meccan caravan at the town of Badr. The caravan requested help from Mecca, who sent an army to the rescue, led by polytheist leader Abu Jahl. The Muslims broke the Meccans' charge and emerged victorious. The Battle of Badr is highly regarded by practicing Muslims, as it strengthened Muhammad's power and allowed Islam to flourish into the world religion it is today. However, the historicity of the battle is debated, as written accounts didn't appear until 2 centuries later. Number 17, the Battle of Cannae.
Now he prepares to face him again in what will be one of the greatest battles of all time. The Battle of Cannae.
Fought between the Roman Republic and Carthage during the Second Punic War, the Battle of Cannae was a disaster for the Romans. They outnumbered Carthage almost 2-1, but suffered nearly 12 times the casualties. Led by the great general Hannibal, the Carthaginians used a pincer movement to surround their foes. Of the 86,000 Romans who fought in the battle, only about 15,000 survived.
The Romans are surrounded, but the battle doesn't stop there.
Hannibal's leadership has influenced military strategy for millennia. The battle also changed the manner in which the Roman Republic fought. Having suffered a humiliating defeat, the Romans introduced reforms to address the flaws in their military strategy. This helped them become a stronger army and led to the flourishing of ancient Rome.
But no matter how many fields Hannibal's men torch or how many towns they pillage, the Romans will not be drawn into another Cannae.
Number 16, the Battle of Hattin. The Battle of the Horns of Hattin, as it's also known, saw the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Crusader states facing off against the Ayyubid Sultanate under Saladin.
God wills it.
It was another great massacre. Saladin's forces saw few casualties, while most of the Christian forces were wiped out. As a result, much of the Holy Land again fell under Muslim control. Pope Urban III reportedly died of shock upon hearing the news, and the Third Crusade was eventually launched to retake Jerusalem. However, it was unsuccessful, and Jerusalem remained under Muslim control for decades.
First I thought we were fighting for God. Then I realized we were fighting for wealth and land.
Number 15, the Battle of Adwa. By the end of the 19th century, most of Africa was under European control. The only independent areas that remained were Liberia and Ethiopia. In 1895, the Kingdom of Italy attempted to conquer the Ethiopian Empire in the First Italo-Ethiopian War. Lasting almost 2 years, it culminated in the Battle of Adwa. The Ethiopian forces under Menelik II emerged victorious, leading to the Treaty of Addis Ababa, which saw Ethiopia recognized as an independent state. Ethiopia's victory went on to inspire African nationalists fighting for decolonization, as well as leaders of Pan-Africanism.
To many historians, the Battle of Adwa was a stunning victory for Ethiopia.
Number 14, the Battle of Vienna. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars between the Ottoman and Holy Roman Empires raged for 300 years. Fought through the summer of 1683, the Battle of Vienna marked an important turning point.
The fall of Vienna would open the door for the Ottomans to conquer all of Western Christendom.
The Ottomans had laid siege to Vienna for 2 months. Allied with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Holy Roman Empire was able to defeat them and lift the siege.
By the evening of the 12th of September, 1683, the battle was won and Vienna was free.
In the aftermath, European nations formed an alliance called the Holy League to prevent further Ottoman expansion into Europe. And in 1697, the Ottomans sued for peace. The Treaty of Karlowitz 2 years later marked the end of the Ottoman Empire's imperial ambitions in Europe.
That day sealed the fate of Ottoman rule in Europe. A document underlined the scale of the Ottoman defeat. The Treaty of Karlowitz.
Number 13, the Siege of Constantinople. Lasting a full year in the late 8th century, the Siege of Constantinople saw the Byzantine Empire, otherwise known as the Eastern Roman Empire, defending its capital against the Umayyad Caliphate. The Muslim forces were eventually defeated, suffering heavy casualties in the process. This significantly demoralized the army, and they abandoned all hope of taking Constantinople. The result was a relatively stable division of territories that remained consistent for the next 2 centuries. In short, this battle effectively prevented Muslim expansion into Europe. Had the Umayyad Caliphate won the Siege of Constantinople, Europe would have fallen under Muslim control, and history would look very different indeed. Number 12, the Battle of Shupang. Taking place during the Chinese Civil War, the Battle of Shupang was fought between the Republic of China and the People's Liberation Army, led by Communist Revolutionary Mao Zedong. Following the 2 months of fighting, the Republic of China army was left devastated. As a result, the Republic of China relocated to Taiwan, while the Communist forces moved north of the Yangtze River. 9 months after the Battle of Shupang, Mao officially founded the People's Republic of China. Today, the Chinese Communist Party continues to control the country. This might have changed had the Republic of China been victorious at the Battle of Shupang. Number 11, the Siege of Orleans. Between the 14th and 15th centuries, England and France were embroiled in the 100 Years' War. A turning point came when the English laid siege to the city of Orleans in central France. On April 29, 1429, Joan of Arc, a French peasant girl who claimed she was destined to rescue the country, arrived in Orleans.
Follow me and I will give you victory!
9 days later, the siege was lifted. While the English still held power in the region, the French victory boosted morale, and the French army swelled with volunteers who wanted to fight under Joan. It effectively prevented the English from conquering France. The 100 Years' War came to an end shortly after, with France victorious and England abandoning their ambition to claim the French throne. Number 10. The Battle of Boyacá. In the early 1800s, Venezuelan revolutionary Simón Bolívar fought to free South America from Spanish rule. On August 7, 1819, he achieved a decisive victory against the Royalists at the Battle of Boyacá in modern-day Colombia, then part of New Granada. He credited the British Legion, composed of volunteers, with winning the day. This victory led to several others, and the ultimate outcome was the liberation of Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, and the creation of Bolivia. Northern South America was united as Gran Colombia, with Bolívar as its first president. He is known and celebrated today as El Libertador.
Esto no es una frontera. Esto es un río.
Number 9. The Battle of Tours. In the early 8th century, the Umayyad Caliphate conquered Hispania and set their sights on Gaul, pushing their way up through what's now southern and central France.
The Moors saw Europe as easy prey, a land defended by barbarians who were too busy fighting each other.
Fought on October 10, 732, the Battle of Tours saw Francia's leader Charles Martel lead his army to victory against superior numbers.
Charles the Hammer nailed down his victory with a covert mission behind enemy lines.
If it wasn't for his strategic prowess, the Umayyad Caliphate would have invaded deeper into Europe, and Islam would have likely become its dominant religion. Historians have credited Martel with preserving Christianity, although there is continued debate over the importance of the battle.
It was his stunning victory at the Battle of Tours that earned Martel the nickname Charles the Hammer.
Number 8. The Battle of the Somme.
The infantry on the Somme were led to believe that between the damage already inflicted by the bombardment and the covering fire of the barrage, their journey across no man's land would be little more than a stroll in the country.
The First World War included many famous battles, including the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of Amiens. But one of the most impactful was the notorious Battle of the Somme in northern France. Lasting 140 days, it was one of the deadliest battles in history, leaving 1 million men wounded or killed.
Almost immediately, German barrage fire rained down with devastating accuracy on the British forward positions.
Despite the terrible cost, the battle saw the French and British front lines advance by just 6 miles. However, the bloody devastation did have an enduring impact on how the war was perceived. It included the deadliest day ever experienced by the British Army when over 19,000 soldiers were killed. It signified that World War I was unlike anything experienced in human history.
Whatever its strategic value, in human terms, the Somme had been a military disaster.
Number 7. The Battle of Gettysburg. Fought over 3 days in July of 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg is considered a major turning point in the American Civil War.
The same passion that built our nation now tears it apart.
The third day of fighting saw the famous Pickett's Charge, a failed infantry assault from the Confederates. This defeat significantly dwindled the Army's numbers, and Robert E. Lee led his forces back to Virginia, his hopes of invading the North squashed.
They're just target practice for Union artillery. The attack that will come to be known as Pickett's Charge is being blown to hell.
The 50,000 casualties makes the Battle of Gettysburg one of the costliest in American history. The Confederates' defeat at Gettysburg cost them the North and served as a major blow to morale. The United States would look very different today had they emerged victorious at Gettysburg.
More than 50,000 casualties. Robert E. Lee's bold invasion of the North has failed.
Number 6. The Battle of Cajamarca. Although it's sometimes referred to as a battle, it's more properly called a massacre. In 1532, Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro invited the Incan ruler Atahualpa to a feast in Cajamarca in northern Peru.
But he makes a fateful decision. that his soldiers should not carry weapons.
In a show of good faith, Atahualpa and his retinue of several thousand arrived in Cajamarca on November 16th unarmed, whereupon Pizarro's men fired on them. Between 2,000 and 7,000 died in the massacre. Atahualpa was captured and his army destroyed.
As the litter falls, Pizarro himself captures Atahualpa.
Eventually, the Spanish executed him. Pizarro made Atahualpa's wife his mistress. The Incan Empire collapsed. Its lands were seized by the Spanish Empire, and its residents sent to work as slaves in Spanish mines.
With Atahualpa dead, the conquistadors went on to colonize the rest of Peru.
Number 5. The Battle of Waterloo. Coalition forces won many decisive victories during the Napoleonic Wars, including the Battle of Trafalgar. But nothing compares to the Battle of Waterloo.
Wellington chooses a battleground just to the south of a village called Waterloo.
The Napoleonic Wars pitted Napoleon and his French Empire against a number of European states who banded together to defend their land. The war lasted 12 years and effectively ended with the Battle of Waterloo in modern-day Belgium.
Within minutes, Napoleon's entire force is in retreat.
The coalition emerged victorious, and Napoleon abdicated the throne just 4 days after his defeat. The First French Empire collapsed, Europe was freed from Napoleon's control, and went on to enjoy a prolonged era of peace and prosperity. Known as the Concert of Europe, the resulting balance of power remained more or less fixed until the outbreak of World War I a century later.
An entire continent was changed. The European empire of Napoleon Bonaparte had been decisively crushed.
Number 4. The Battle of Hastings.
A single battle between a few thousand men permanently changed the course of history in England and beyond.
Even 1,000 years later, 1066 remains one of the most famous years in history. Invading England from Normandy in northwest France, William the Conqueror defeated King Harold II's forces at Hastings on England's south coast. Harold was killed in battle, and William crowned king the following December.
The king was dead.
Hence the sobriquet, the Conqueror. Norman rule of England saw the old aristocracy replaced, and Norman French became the language of administration, an influence that can still be seen in the English language today. It also resulted in the eventual elimination of slavery in England in favor of serfdom. Number 3. The Battle of Marathon. The Greco-Persian Wars between 499 and 449 BC saw numerous notable battles. However, one of the most pivotal came in the year 490, when Athenians and their Plataean allies faced off against Persian invaders at the town of Marathon.
From the mountains high above Marathon, Miltiades and his 10 generals had a clear view of the Persian army arrayed beneath them. This was an army over twice their number.
Despite being outnumbered, the Greeks secured a surprising victory, pushing the Persian forces back. The Greco-Persian Wars would continue, with other important battles including those of Thermopylae and Plataea. But Greece's eventual victory over the Persians all started at Marathon.
The Persians were a broken force. They had never been defeated by the Greeks. But now thousands of their soldiers lay dead.
This paved the way for Greece's classical period, where much of Western traditions in art, philosophy, politics, and science originate.
Marathon was a true battle, a real battle that was decisive and that threw back an invading enemy.
Number 2. The Battle of Gaugamela. The Persians suffered another devastating defeat in the Battle of Gaugamela in October of 331 BC. Having already penetrated deep into Persian territory, Alexander the Great's army of Macedon faced off a final time against the forces of King Darius III. And, well, they don't call him Alexander the Great for nothing.
On the other side is an army 1/5 the size, led by a 26-year-old named Alexander.
Despite being vastly outnumbered, Alexander's superior tactics resulted in a stunning victory. After this defeat, the Achaemenid Empire collapsed and fell under Greek control. Alexander's empire flourished and allowed the classical Greek period to spread its influence throughout much of the Mediterranean world and West and Central Asia. It was the most powerful empire of its time and effectively birthed Western civilization as we know it.
For Alexander, the Battle of Gaugamela was, you might say, the final decisive battle.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them.
If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1. The Battle of Stalingrad. The Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944 led to the liberation of France and victory on the Western Front. But it was the earlier Battle of Stalingrad in southern Russia that turned the tide of the war.
On August the 29th, 4th Panzer mounted a major offensive through the center of the salient towards Stalingrad.
After 5 grueling, bloody months of fighting, with an estimated 2 million casualties, the German forces surrendered to the Soviet Union on February 2, 1943.
The last pockets of resistance in the north were not liquidated until February the 2nd, and only then at the cost of several thousand more lives.
This marked a devastating defeat for Nazi Germany and its allies. Not only did it reduce numbers and morale, it forced them to reshuffle forces throughout occupied Europe. Hitler later blamed Stalingrad for his impending defeat, and historians tend to agree with him. We might not recognize a world where Stalingrad had fallen.
In the coming months and years, it would find itself fighting increasingly alone, deserted one by its Axis partners, and facing a Red Army that had gained new reserves of strength from its victory in Stalingrad.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.